We used to leave the blue light.
Let's see, Department 9. Department 9 is on the... Oh, Department 9 is on the second floor. We just went through there, the security. Yeah. Let's go here. We're on the I'm going to the second floor. Department 9. Well, sufficient at least.
Hi, my name is Wilson Bao. Me and the rest of Group 4 will be talking to you today about preliminary hearings. I'd like to introduce the rest of my group members. Here we have Karen, who is talking to an attorney. Here is Dewey in the middle of our group photo. And here we have me, Wilson Bao, the heart of the group. We did have a fourth member, but he ended up dropping out of this class. For our assignment, we went to the Gordon D. Shaver Sacramento County Courthouse. Finding the preliminary hearing is the hard part. We had to talk to the master clerk to find out how to get to one. She said we had to go to Department 9, and that's where the judge assigns out preliminary hearings. The room kind of looks like this. The judge would go through all the cases and decide which room the case would get for a prelim. We had to listen and write down the potential room number, and then we went and checked each room. A lot of the cases end up settling right outside, so despite what the judge says, there may not even be a hearing. A preliminary hearing is a proceeding where the judge determines whether there is enough evidence to proceed to trial. It is done after a prosecutor files a complaint. It is often known as the trial before the trial. Now, there are grand jury indictments at the federal level, but because this is a state, it is not required. Now then, I'd like to discuss the hearings that we saw. The first preliminary hearing we saw was at Department 42. This hearing was about a suspected drug deal. The officer observed the defendant making contact with another person. He heard the defendant say, "What's up, OG? Looking to buy something?" After this encounter, the officer approached and arrested the defendant. It turns out the defendant was on parole. The defense had a chance to cross-examine the officer, but it was uneventful. The judge found that a crime has been committed in this case and decided to go forth with the trial. We were lucky that there was one more hearing scheduled right after in the same room. This next case was about vehicle theft. The officer said a white Acura was reported stolen. The officer found the missing car on Albatross Street. The officer continued to observe the car until he saw the defendant in a hoodie with his hands in his pockets approach the stolen vehicle. The defendant entered the car and sat in the driver's seat. The officer then followed behind the defendant with his patrol car. The defendant immediately got out of the car and ran. The defendant was later apprehended on El Camino Street. The defense did a cross-examination and tried to establish the possibility that the defendant did not know the car was stolen. The judge found that a crime has been committed in this case and decided to go forth with the trial. This last case was in Department 32. The room number is blocked by my head. I thought the public defender here was pretty funny. This case is pretty unique because it happened in the prison, and there was correctional officers behind the defendant. The officer was moving the defendant to a holding cell when he observed the defendant throwing a plastic ball onto the floor. It turned out it was a latex glove filled with marijuana. Defense didn't make a noteworthy cross-examination. The judge found that a crime has been committed in this case and decided to go forth with the trial. While we were there, everybody from judges to attorneys were really friendly. Trying to find a preliminary hearing is hard, especially because a lot of rooms the judge assigns out in Department 9 end up duds. The defense attorney often don't do much during the cross-examination. Often the defense attorney, prosecutors, bailiffs, and judges were chatty and friendly with one another before and after each hearing. This might be an example of the courtroom work group in action. The defendant always came in with handcuffs, which are removed by the bailiff for the hearing. The witnesses are always sworn in by the bailiff, and every witness we observe turned out officers. Every defendant had a public defender. Most likely it's because the defendants are indigent. So we've compiled some important questions about preliminary hearings and the answers to those questions. I'm going to have Dewey help me with every other question. Are preliminary hearings just rubber stamps to go to trial? No, it offers everybody the invaluable opportunity to test out evidence. In fact, a prosecutor we talked to said she threw out a case that day because the live witness had a shaky testimony. Pretty much every person we talked to, from bailiffs to attorneys to judges, all said that the preliminary hearing is an essential part of the process.
When in the process do preliminary hearings happen? Preliminary hearings are usually right after the arraignment but before the trial.
Why does the defense attorney don't do much during cross-examinations? Defense and prosecutors don't go all out during preliminary hearings. It is also better strategy-wise. A judge we talked to said they saved their hand for the trial.
Does the defendant get an attorney at the preliminary hearing? Yes. The preliminary hearing is a critical stage of the prosecution, so they have a right to have a lawyer present.
What are the different kinds of testimony? All of the observed preliminary hearings involved officer testimony, but according to a prosecutor we talked to, there are also what we call live witnesses, which are witnesses of citizens. Usually hearings involving these witnesses take a lot longer.
Why is it so easy to convince the judge to go to trial at the preliminary hearing? This is because the burden of proof is much lower to that of which required at trial. It only requires probable cause, not beyond a reasonable doubt.
So I'm going to let Karen take care of this next part.
Our group is lucky that Dewey is friends with a judge. Unfortunately, he preferred not to be videotaped. Luckily for you guys, we have reenacted how it played out. So, what is the most interesting part of the job?
The most interesting part of the job is that every day is a new challenge. Every case is different and new. You can never tell what you have seen before because there are new issues, new cases, and new people.
Does jury nullification happen often?
Jury nullification does not happen often. If it happens at all, it's not allowed. Not a legal doctrine. However, misdemeanor of unimportance, jury can do it. Lawyers can't say.
Oh, what effects does a person's race have on a trial?
Very little to do as long as the judge and the prosecutor can convince the jurors that everybody is entitled to equal justice under the law. Jurors should take their responsibility seriously, and that judge and jurors are based on the facts to the interest of justice.
Are preliminary hearings just a rubber stamp?
Preliminary is not a rubber stamp. Preliminary hearings serve the interests of both defense and prosecutors to test evidence and to see strengths and weaknesses of their cases, especially when the witnesses are called to testify. Many cases are resolved because of what happens at preliminary examinations.
Well, thank you for your time, Judge.
You're welcome.
We couldn't really bring cameras inside the courtroom. Our group even got in trouble for taking pictures around the building. So we decided to end on a reenactment of what prelim hearings are like.
The court is now in session for People versus Smith. Prosecutor, you may now examine the witness.
Officer Rodriguez, would you please tell us what happened on the night of October 2nd?
On the day of October 2nd, I saw the defendant, Smith, was selling drugs to an individual. I arrested Smith, I read him his rights, and during those rights, he admitted to me that he was selling drugs. The defense, your cross-examination?
I got nothing.
Okay, seems interesting. Well, I see that a crime has been committed here, and we shall go to trial. There's enough probable cause.
So that's our presentation. I hope you all learned a lot about preliminary hearings today. Remember that preliminary hearings are just as essential as any other part of the prosecution. Thank you for watching.
When it's over, that's the time I